Well, what a frustrating afternoon that were. These are always hardest videos to do. So I hate when you're winning and you can sit here and talk about goals. When you have to pick your way through a 0-0 draw where we haven't really muscled a shot on target. But anyway, that's what you're here for. That's what I'm here for. So let's have a look at it then. As expected, Gillingham stuck with their 3-5-2 come 5-3-2. Very much a similar setup to the Accrington game, which I've also watched back. That's 4 hours of my life I'll never get back watching them two back to back. But again, similar setup, frustration for Wednesday, man for man, and blocking out the spaces with a spare man. So we'll have a quick look at the team lineups. There were a couple of changes for Gillingham. Chapman came in goal, and Jackson came in as the right-sided wing-back. Other than that, unchanged from the last game, Tucker, Emma, Masterton at centre-back, Jackson, Thompson, Lee, O'Keefe and Tutonda, and Kelman and Oliver up front. Wednesday made changes as well. Peacock Farrell remained in goal. Story was moved across back to his more comfortable right-sided centre-half position. Hutchinson to the left, and a bit of a surprise, maybe Shea Dunkley came into the centre of the three at the back. Up front, do you know, in a home game I won't mind it, but it was Callum Patterson and Lee Gregory, a change of partnership once more. The first thing, and it was clear from the first few minutes of the game, was that Gillingham were not going to be squeezing us up the pitch and trying to press us, say, in the way that Lincoln did. It was very much the same as Accrington, where they were willing to drop off, go man for man, and they'd always got somebody spare to drop into the spaces. The way that showed itself easily, if you know what I mean, is the strikers, Kelman and Oliver. They weren't airing in, closing down in that sense. They were doing the curve split like that and going out to the wide fullbacks and allowing Dunkley especially to have a lot of the ball. It suited him. Centre half, whose main asset is not his ball playing, was probably the Wednesday player who was seeing most of the ball in the first half. And I said that's just their forwards. They weren't closing down as a pair. They were splitting off and going more towards the wide centre halves and trying to stop that. And they weren't really engaging us sort of until we got into that, I would say, middle third, their side of the centre circle, if you know what I mean. It should have been a booking, actually, though. I mean, when they did close down, when they did get tight, they were very tight. They weren't afraid to get a boot in. I mean, there should have been a yellow card for a obvious foul on Patterson after about 5 minutes, and that would sort of the indication of the sort of afternoon that we were going to face. Dunkley. I'll talk about Dunkley's inclusion. I didn't think, having watched that Accrington game back, that Iowa looked very sharp. Fully understandable. From what I'd heard about his injury, it's probably we weren't expecting him to be back this season the way I'd been told it. So ahead of schedule, been out for a long time, and he's had a few minutes here and there, including in a 6-0 win. So not tested too much. The last game tested a bit more, and again, similar to what happened to Dunkley today, but look back at the Accrington game, I offer seeing a lot of the ball, probably not his strength to be honest with you, and a lot of little 5-10 yard passes out and back to goalkeeper, and it was a similar story today for Dunkley. Dunkley's a character though. This has come across in social media stuff that Wednesday put out in the videos, in the interviews. A buoyant character and somebody who wants to get in and do well. And again, he's been out a long time. And looking at this performance, I would say one of the things that stuck out to me is I think he was trying too hard to impress Darren Moore. Being out a while, it makes sense to go in and just try and have a steady game. But I think he was trying too hard, so he kept going out. I'll go and deal with that. But Story was already there. I'll go and deal with that. But Hutchinson was already there. And the first 10-15 minutes with a lot of these mix-ups. In fact, their first opportunity came from something like that when he's gone out towards where Story is and Kelman gets a shot away. From Dunkley's point of view, he signs for the club. He's played for some, no offence, some smaller clubs in his career and done well at them. At his age, With broken leg, this is probably his last big move. He's moved to Wednesday, it's a big club, you want to do well, and then your career here is hampered with injuries all the way through. He'll be desperate to do well, desperate to get his way back in the team, and a team that's in and around the playoffs. And I think there was a bit of older enthusiasm from him, if you like, to try and show, look what I can do, Gaffer. That and a little bit of ring rustiness. Hutchinson, I thought, was coming inside a lot with his passing, but it's bound to happen. He was in that left side centre-half slot, and he is right-footed. He will use his left foot, as we saw on a few occasions, but there's always that natural tendency to want to come in, which suited them because they got the 5 across the middle and they got the 3 at the back, so it was going into that congested area. That said, I think with Gibson out and Palmer out, Hutchinson is your best option in that left-sided centre-half slot. You're gonna... Gibson and Palmer. Bad news is it's been reported that Liam Palmer and Lewis Gibson are going to be out for a number of weeks. That's a huge blow. Gibson especially, he's coming to the side. I've been really impressed with him. Brings that balance with his left foot. And that back three of Story, Hutchinson and Gibson, for my money, that's been the best three of the season that we've played so far. The fact that we kept hold of him while he was injured does lead me to think, and not saying I'm right, just my thought processes, the fact we kept hold of him and that kept that deal alive when he was injured for such a huge part of the season suggests to me that he's a player we were looking at keeping permanently and trying to work some deal out for. And as a player, fantastic. I've been more than happy with that. He looks a terrific player, especially at this level of the game. His injuries, however, do set the alarm bells ringing, especially as a Wednesday fan. I mean, the number of injured players we've signed over the years. To contrast against that, to set against that, what I would say is that he's been out with a big injury for a long time, and although he's injured again, it doesn't have to mean it's an Alman Abdi situation, you know. You're more likely to be out with a strain when you're playing after being out for a long while. It's just one of them things about football. So hopefully he comes back from that. But a number of weeks, you know, we're in March now. Season ends at end of April, you know, 3/4 away through April. So is he going to miss rest of the season? Would be a question I'd have to ask. Palmer, we're not a situation there. There'll be folks getting party poppers out. Oh, he's out, brilliant. But, well, no. I think because for the left-sided centre-half spot, I think after Gibson, he's your best bet. I think Story's looked lost when he's played left-sided centre-half. Don't think Hutchinson's been at his best at left centre-half. Dunkley certainly didn't earlier in the season. And if the other option is having to drop Marvin Johnson back in there, well, we can all remember how that went, you know. Obviously the lad's doing the gaffer a favour playing there, but you won't want to go down that avenue again, I'll put it that way. So to lose, for my money, your first choice and your second choice left-sided centre-half, that's a big, big blow. Cheltenham to come. Ali Dean play left-sided centre-half? I can't remember when we signed him whether he's a left-footed or a right-footer. If he's a left-footed, maybe he slots in there, but big blow that. Big blow. Gets to about 20 minutes and the game has fallen into a rhythm, which is them letting Wednesday have the ball, especially our back three. They're willing to sit off and let Wednesday advance into them. And they're nice and compact. They're playing a sort of line from their 18-yard box to the edge of their side of the centre circle, and it's really compressed in there. And as soon as we do get in there, they're in, they're sharp, and they're going man for man. It was very difficult for us to break them down. In a game like that, the most important thing is your movement. You've got to have that good movement, because all about possession's just possession. It's a useless statistic. It's what you do with the possession. And in a game like that, when they lined up like that, the chances of you getting in around the sides are very slim. So Hunt, Johnson, not really the opportunity to get behind and get crosses in. They'll just put a wall out in front of you, so you've got to find another way. You've got to pull them out of position. And as I said, they're tight, they're man for man. So it's got to be them little 1-2s, the little triangles, the give and go. Your movement has got to be very, very good. I didn't think Wednesday's movement was very good. We had a lot of the ball. We'd have it for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'd ping one, and that fell right into their hands because their back three were willing to egg stuff and kick stuff all day long. They weren't afraid to put it over the stand roof, which is something Wednesday probably should have been doing with some of their clearances. We hit a lot of tap it out clearances. You know, there's the old saying, put it in back at stand. Wednesday knocking a lot of stuff out, and they got a lad with a tremendous long throw. I think it was Jackson. He was taking them from both sides. They were prepared to wait for him to shuttle 60 yards across pitch to take a long throw because it was a weapon. It was as good as a corner in many ways. So Wednesday not really switched on to that distance on it. 25 minutes in, they get a throw in. It gets cleared out for a corner, and when it comes back in, that Kelman, he should probably bury it actually, but between them, Storey and Dunkley. But again, Storey and Dunkley jumping up for the same ball, just about between them, do enough to put him off. You wouldn't have really known where they were in the table, to be honest with you. It's a really well executed game plan from Gillingham. Very frustrating for Wednesday. Sat off, keeping it tight. The passing angles were nadded, and like I said, very tight. And as soon as Wednesday were trying to play the cute little triangles, they were man for man, they were touch tight, and they were getting a foot in, and they weren't afraid for a bit of wrestling either, by the way. Well executed plan from them. Frustrating as hell to watch as a Wednesday fan now, because you could see the way that the game was going after just 20 minutes. Couple of mix-ups. Dunkley goes again to a ball that has come down the sort of inside left channel. Oliver's cut inside and played a 1-2 with Totonda, who I thought a brilliant player, by the way. I don't know where they've got him from, but really impressed me. Little 1-2 there, comes in. Storey's going out to engage him. Dunkley comes across to engage him, and he actually hits Storey, and they both get taken out of the game. And Kelman has a drive at Peacock Farrell's, 25 yards, something like that. Oliver gets in on rebound, and fortunately for us, he puts it straight down Peacock Farrell's throat. But the warning signs are there that they're prepared to have a go at us on the break, and they're quite a physical side as well, not afraid of hustle and bustle. Another little mix-up. Wednesday don't look confident. They're having a lot of ball up back, but a sort of an under-hit ball back to Peacock Farrell, and you can see our defenders are expecting him to come and ladder it. There's a bit of a mix-up, and it ends up that Dunkley ends up having to sweep it away. There's a bit of a conflab about it. But equally, at the other end, probably 40 seconds later, they have a similar situation. Two players go up for an header. I think it was Gregory and one of their lads, Amer. It gets nodded back, and it's a sort of 50-50 who's there. So it's going to be a foot race with a set at half. And Gregory, don't matter, because their keeper is straight out and bang into the back of the stand. That's the difference in the mentality. They were full of confidence, full of beans. They'd grown throughout the game. On Wednesday, I don't know if it's the pressure, but there was a hesitancy to what we were doing at the back. I have to flash back to the Accrington game, which I have now caught up with. That had got a similar rhythm to it, and Wednesday was struggling, but the difference is we scored a goal in that game. Now, Barry Bannon got subbed. It was a game very similar to this, where it was imperative that Wednesday got the passing going. They weren't always going to be able to get in around the sides, and it's all about that acute movement and using the ball well over short distances. When we scored that goal, it made Accrington have to come out a little bit more. They had to engage a little bit more, and when they did that, it creates them little spaces. Now, I was a bit surprised in that game that Barry Bannon came off. Now, I thought Barry Bannon against Accrington had a very, very quiet game. Not alone in that by any means, and he has played a lot of football, but I thought he was very quiet. However, I was surprised when Delabishiru came on for him, because after we'd scored, they were coming out a little bit more. The spaces were opening up, and I actually thought Bannon was just starting to show a little bit more what he can do with the ball, because there were more spaces for him to be able to thread things through. So I was a bit surprised at that. Probably more surprised that yesterday, in a game where we'd not got the goal advantage, where they had got men behind the ball, where they were tight man to man, and where there wasn't that space, and when our movement It genuinely wasn't good enough, to be honest with you. You've got to have really good movement when it's that tight. If that's not working, you've got to think of other things to do. And when you've got a rigid defence like that, I'm really surprised that yesterday wasn't the game when we looked at a player like Derbyshire, because when they're playing it tight like that, man to man, and they've got the spare, you've got to do something completely different. Derbyshire is a player, he's a tank of a lad who will get the ball and he will just set off. We've seen it time and again. He don't always pull it off, but people bounce off him. If the 1-2s aren't working, if the cute play ain't working, if your strikers aren't getting the slip on the centre half, if you've got somebody from midfield who can just charge straight through the middle and give me the ball, bang, and run right at the heart of them, you give them a decision to make. Because they're man to man and they're looking at each other. Somebody's got to go and engage him. This kid's piling towards our goal. Who's going to break ranks? Somebody's got to go to him, or he's going to get a shot away, or whatever it is. So, not saying he would have done that and scored goals or anything like that, but a player who's willing to drive on and run at people with pace and power, it asks that question of the defenders. Are you going to stay and risk it, or are you going to go and engage him? I think that's what this game we're calling out for. I've no idea why he weren't in the squad, if he were injured or whatever, but for me, if I'm sat in dugout looking at it, that's the sort of change I've been looking to make. Somebody who's got the ball and can drive on, do something different, because we knew we had to do the 1-2s and the cute stuff. It weren't coming off for us, but it was sloppy. A lot of the passing was too sloppy to be able to combat what we needed to do. So, a game I thought that was calling out for somebody like Derbyshire to come on and drive right at the heart of them and give them something completely different to think about, because the way they were asking us to play, we couldn't do it. They came out second half and you could see they were absolutely full of beans. They were delighted with the way they were playing, and Wednesday couldn't really match it. We'd not got enough in the locker to break them down. We'd not got the cuteness. Now, overall, I think we have. I do think we've got players who are cute enough to do that. Calling out for a player to do a Kieran Lee yesterday, that little give and go on the edge of the box. I think we have got those players, but they just weren't on it. Loose passes, not a huge pitch, and we weren't quite on it. They came out and they were very buoyant after the break, and for 10 minutes, it was them who were breaking at real pace on us. They were getting a foot in a little bit earlier, and I think they were just trying to squeeze, thinking if we can nick a goal, even better, and then go back. But there's a stop in play. O'Keefe and their other lad, I don't know if it was Jackson. Oh, it was Oliver. Oliver and O'Keefe went up for a throw-in, clashed their own heads. What was interesting there was there's this stop in play. Peacock Faddle's up on halfway line. He's 70 yards out of his goal, and there's a bit going on with him and Dunkley and Story. And clearly it's about the communication, because there had been a lack of communication. The players can't be blamed for that entirely, though. I think the manager has to take some responsibility for that, because we've got a settled back three. Admittedly, Gibson being out, Palmer being out, that cannot be helped. But it's a back three that hasn't played together, and it looked like a back three that hadn't played together. Yeah, we've got nobody like Derbyshire on the bench to change and give us that drive, that someone who will do some powerful running, which is what it required. Byers, Luongo, I thought the passing was slightly off. Bannon was pulling some stuff off, but again, the movement around him wasn't terrific, and even some of his passing was wayward. We needed somebody to offer that something different that Derbyshire does, or an Adeniran when he's fit and available. We ended up knocking these little easy-to-head diagonals into the box, because they're not full diagonals. They're what I call a flat diagonal. It's absolute meat and drink for the defender. And as I said, our centre forwards, they've been tight man-marked each, and they've got the spare. So them diagonals, we weren't really going to get anything from any of them. The only time we nearly did, Bannon actually played a nice half-reverse diagonal. But again, these bodies coming in. Gregory's got hardly any time when he has to take a snapshot. I mean, if it had gone in, it would have been one of the best goals of the season. It was half David Hurst, volley against Aston Villa mixed with Marco van Basten against Russia, so it wasn't a proper opportunity. Do you know what I mean? It's one of them strikes, it will go in 1 in 100 times, so that's what Wednesday were limited to. Gregory and Patterson. I think Gregory's best games have come with a big lad alongside him. I've been saying that for a long time. I think his best games have all come with Canberra, especially at home and when teams come out and engage and have a go at it, because the space around the big lad, Gregory operates in really well. His link play is really good, and he was always aware. He always seems to know whereabouts the ball's going to come off his partner and where it's going to land. But this wasn't that sort of game. Hunt wasn't getting to the bar line and getting crosses in. Johnson wasn't getting crosses in. There was nothing really for him to hit. There was nothing really for him to try and get on the end of. As I said, the way they set up Gillingham, it was a game that said to Wednesday, if you're going to break us down, you're going to have to be bloody good at football. You're going to have to be very good in tight situations, tight little corners, and try and play your way through that. And as I said, Byers, Bannon, Luongo, I think they're probably the best 3 midfielders in division, and I think they are capable of doing that. Yesterday, they weren't capable of doing it. The other thing that didn't help, when you've got players like that up front, they've got to have better movement. Now, Gregory's movement's really good, but he's been out a long while. Patterson's more of a bludgeon of a player. Darren Moore did make early subs. I'd have probably made him at half time, because when it's that game, I've said it 100 times so far already in this video, where you need that bit of cuteness, where the only way you're going to have to break them down is with them really tight 1-2s and clever balls around the corner and the touch and turns. When that's the only way you're going to break through, you need a player who can do that up top as well. And so I'm a little bit surprised that Berahino weren't on earlier. And given that Harris has been setting up with this 3-5-2 even before they played Wednesday, and bearing in mind they will watch the video of what Accrington did using a similar system, I think it would have made sense to start Berahino, because that's talked about it probably the last 4, 5, 6 videos we've done. It's one of his main weapons, is the touch and turn and get a shot away in a very tight box, a crowded box with tight man-to-man marking. So I'm a little bit surprised he didn't start. I'm surprised he weren't brought on earlier. But I mean, we don't really. There's that Gregory effort. Bannon has a sort of curler which goes 4 yards wide. It's a gentle one. There's just not the space. There is not the space. But it's fair play to them. It's a brilliantly executed game plan. In fact, he gets one another 2 minutes later where he does actually get it more, I won't say on target, but he actually forces the keeper to grab hold of it anyway. But it's a game where Wednesday create nothing clear cut, and it's really disappointing. There's a way of doing it, there's a way of breaking that team down, and if that way is not working, you've got to have something else. So Wednesday's plan is often to get crosses in. That weren't going to work today. Plan B, knocking about tight spaces, 1-2s. That's not working. Plan C, and you've got to have them. Plan C is get someone who's just going to run straight at heart of him and say, right, come and engage, foul me, do what you want to do. We didn't have that option available. To spell about 72 minutes, the referee had an odd game for me. Blatant yellow card tackle against Patterson after 5 minutes. He books Dunkley for a grapple. He then lets him off half an hour later with an even more blatant grapple, which probably should have seen Dunkley get his second yellow and his marching orders. He ignores that. I think it's Jackson. Like I said, he's done one on Patterson after 5 minutes. Then there's one that he does on Luongo in second half. It's a nailed on yellow. Absolutely nailed on. And that should be his second yellow and a red. Don't give that. The way Luongo's gone down, though, I mean, if that's not a yellow card for foul by defender, the way Luongo's gone down, he should give him a yellow card for diving, because there's no way in the world a player goes down like that if he's not being touched. It's got to be an over-the-top dive or a foul. He don't give either. He's just like, yeah, get on. I don't know. Very odd game, I thought, from him, referee. last 15 minutes or so, Gillingham are content to let Wednesday have ball, and they're closing down, but it's not what I'd call proper closing down. It's not proper pressing where they're pressing with the intent to win the ball. It's what I'd call in and out pressing, where they're in, let their player move it, drop back off, your next man, he goes in, Wednesday player knocks it off, he drops off. And this is where possession stats are hugely misleading. That will look like Wednesday had a spell of 10 minutes of the football. But we had 10 minutes of the football, but they were controlling where it was without having it, because of the way they went and pressed, but without the intention of winning it. They were just pressing with the intention of getting that Wednesday player to move it somewhere where they were comfortable with it, which was usually in our back three. Very frustrating. Yeah, I'd like to see Delhi involved. Look at the Cambridge game. Luongo, Byers, Bannon, Johnson, Hunt, all popping up in their box at regular intervals. Talked in the last video, Byers and Luongo playing a 1-2 in their box. That's our two deep line players. Couldn't get in this box. The movement weren't good enough, the passing weren't slick enough. He had a very quiet game. I don't think it was the sort of game for him, but I thought Byers probably used the ball best of all Wednesday plays. He was the least sloppy with his passing, although didn't particularly achieve anything going forward. I thought Luongo looked a bit leggy. It just weren't one of them games. But it was a game where we didn't really need a defensive midfield player, so I was a little bit surprised with the substitution with Dean coming on and shuffling Hutchinson. But without Delabashir or somebody of that type in midfield on the bench, you know, the options were a bit limited, but didn't really need a holding player the way that Gillingham set up. I do wonder how much the Cambridge result is going to affect how teams are looking at us. I was thinking about this the other day. Score 6 goals, put Cambridge to bed. And then I'm looking at Accrington. You know, they're desperate for points. And I think if Wednesday, even if they batter them with the ball, but if Wednesday had only beat Cambridge 1-0, is Coleman looking at that and thinking, oh, it can't be that great Wednesday, maybe we'll have a bit more of a popper and maybe we can be a bit more expensive. But when you score 6 goals, it goes ultra defensive. We can't risk that happening to us. So in some ways, 6-0 a statement of intent. I think in a way it's worked against us. I think Accrington probably went more defensive than they otherwise would have done. I think Gillingham see that. They see the Cambridge result themselves and, oh Christ, we don't need any of that. Then they see what Accrington do. They're already playing 3 at back anyway, so it's like, right, we'll do the same. So far from that 6-0 against Cambridge being a warning shot across the bows of all the other clubs, I think it's been a warning that's been heeded and in a way worked against us. Darren Moore's tactics. I don't think there's particularly anything wrong with our tactics. It's been getting us results. Hunt and Johnson, especially in the home fixtures, getting around the side, getting plenty of crosses in, and we have been getting goals from crosses. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. That tactic. Very pleased he's doing that because I'm old-fashioned. I love seeing crosses getting fizzed across box and people jumping out into them. In terms of the other plan, the plan B, if you like, is the playing it through the midfield. Byers has been getting involved with the goals. Bannon, probably his season's best for scoring goals. So I've heard people say Darren Moore ain't got a plan B. I think that's nonsense. I think he has got a plan A and a plan B. There's the get it wide crosses situation and there's the play through midfield situation. As it was yesterday, neither of those things worked. And we probably did need a plan C, which, as I've said, if it were me, my plan C would have been get someone on who can drive at the heart of the defence. The one thing where I would question him yesterday, and possibly against Accrington now I've seen it, is the selection thing. We've put a very good run together, and as I said, although it can't be helped with Gibson and Palmer, with two huge blows as far as I'm concerned, has he now got too many players to pick from, and is it clouding his judgment a little bit of, oh, put him in, he might do well against these, or he might do well against them, when you ain't got a choice. When you're down to two fit strikers, they both play every week, don't they? And strikers have little purple patches, and in and out, I don't think it helps. Don't think it helps build partnerships. Don't think it helps build rhythm. And at the beginning of the season, that's one of the things we were talking about a lot, was there was an opportunity for partnerships to grow. If you look at our midfield, for example, we'd have Bannon and Wing in there, then we'd have Byers and Bannon in there, and there was always this chopping and changing. Adeniran and Bannon. There was always this chop and change, and there wasn't that fluidity and rhythm and understanding of, when I'm here, he knows to go there. When he's going there, I know to drop off. If he's doing this, I'll go out and close him. That understanding only comes from a run of games, and I think with our midfield three, you've seen that over the last couple of months. An understanding, a connectivity between those players, and I think they've been very good. Didn't have enough in the locker yesterday, but generally been very good. Similar up front, chopping and changing all the time, chopping and changing partnerships. Does it work? You get a couple of games with the player, you eventually work out, oh, when I'm holding it here, I know he's always going to be spinning in behind, and I'll try and get flick there. When I get ball here, I know he's always going to be behind me, so I'll look for layoff back to him. You get used to that. Next week, you've got somebody else in, you do that little layoff back. Oh, where's he? Oh, he's over there. He doesn't play that way. So it can cloud the judgment, and you, like I said, you can lose that momentum that you've built up and understandings, little partnerships all over the park. And we have got quite a big squad. And I can understand this temptation, because if you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, Dunkley was played a month before he was injured, so I'm going to stick him back in. But he's been out a long time, so he's going to be rusty. You've got to account for that as well. Up front, Patterson, Berahino scoring goals, looking quite lively. But then your top scorer's back. The temptation's there, innit? I'm going to put him straight in. But does he work with them other players? And it's all these little things. And like I said, I understand the temptation, because you can say, Iofa, well, most teams in the division would want him in the team, but he's been out for months. Is he going to slot in? Do you want to break that up with Story, Hutchinson, because that's got that nice balance to it? So a lot of little things to think about, and I do think it's clouding the waters. I mean, we talk about tinkering. The first time I heard this tinkering in football was Claudio Ranieri when he was at Chelsea, the Tinkerman. It was like every week. I mean, Chelsea, what were their 50-man squad when Abramovich first come in and chucking money about like a man with no arms? He got a huge squad, and he was like, God, who do I pick? I've got 9 strikers. So every week it's somebody different. And then he goes to Leicester. He picks the same 11 every week, and they win the league. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much about it, but I certainly suspect it's given Darren Moore too much to think about. And this is where his assistants will come in handy, Wayne Jacobs and the Smith lad. This is where they've got to help him and say, let's not mix that back three up. They've been doing well. Let's not fanny about up front all the time. We've got a balance. And if we've got those really good players coming back, have them on bench. Ease them in. If you're going to use Gregory, make sure you're playing him with someone else 2-3 games on the bounce, so they can build up that understanding. Like we saw when he had 2 or 3 games earlier in the season with Canberra. Canberra's not everybody's cup of tea, but the 2 or 3 games you could see that little understanding developing. And that's what football is all about. If you've got that, you've got a chance. Oh, right. Should we have a look at table then and see what that did? That's very hard to watch, 0-0, and that it's good in some ways, even harder to watch, 1-1. Anyway, let's have a look at table. Rotherham United still leading with 80 points. Wigan in second with 79. Then the playoff pack, MK Dons top of the pack with 76. Sunderland in that last spot with 67, just a point ahead of Wednesday and Wycombe on 66. 8 games remaining, still plenty of points to play for, though. No point getting too depressed about it now, because we're not in it now. It's about where we finish the season, not where we are with 8 games to go. So we're just outside the pack. And compared to some of the other teams, on paper at least, we've got an easier running. I mean, look at Plymouth, for example. They've got some really tough games. They've got to play Wycombe Wanderers. They've got to go and play away at Wigan Athletic. They've got Sunderland on the horizon as well. And they finished the season with a game against that top of the pack MK Dons. Sunderland also got a few tough games. They've got Oxford to play away from home, Plymouth to face away from home, Rotherham United to face again. Not the easiest running. Oxford too, tough games. They've got Plymouth, Sunderland at home, MK Dons also to play, Rotherham United away from home. All these teams above us, MK Dons, Plymouth, Oxford, Sunderland, all got some very tough games on the horizon. The only team Wednesday's really got to play in that pack is MK Dons, which I think is that the Friday night game, I think on the 12th. Yeah, that's the Friday night game, 15th of April. On paper, Wednesday's got an easier running, though of course we struggle with the teams at the bottom end of the table. But the point is this, all these teams have got to play each other. Some of them are going to drop points. That's the main thing to think about at this stage. So we'll try and not get too depressed about it. It is what it is. I said before game, but as long as we didn't lose. I know that can seem a negative mentality, but away from home, clean sheet. We've got some more home games to come. There were 2 out of the next 3 at home. Pick up them points. Some of these teams above us, they're all going to play each other. They're definitely, there's points getting dropped there. Whatever happens, there's points getting dropped there. We've just got to make sure we take advantage. I'm not going to worry too much about away games, but do them home games, I think we'll be thereabouts still. Dean's on comeback trail, Mendes Lang on comeback trail, and as long as we don't disrupt the team too much, good first 11, strong bench, just at right time of season. I finished that quite positively, Anna, after such a fucking horrible game to watch. Anyway, I'll see you for preview for Cheltenham. See you later. Walking clock cold.